Welcome to the Grid Mod Pod, brought to you by AEIC. In this podcast, you'll hear from the utility industry's top operations leaders on how their companies are working to modernize and improve our ever-evolving power grid. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, your host of the Grid Mod Pod and Vice President of Technical Strategy at AEIC. On today's episode, I discuss the intersection of environmental stewardship, community engagement, and utility leadership with Casey Tompkins, ecologist and wetland scientist at Orange Rockland Utilities. This issue is important because utilities have a unique responsibility to do more than deliver reliable energy. They also shape how land is managed, how communities experience infrastructure, and how future generations understanding the relationship between the built environment and the natural world. Efforts like the Community Enrichment project show that utility spaces can become places of education, connection, and ecological value. This conversation highlights how biodiversity, energy education, and community partnership can come together in ways that strengthen both environmental outcomes and public trust. We hope you walk away today from this podcast with insights and momentum needed to spark change in our industry. So thank you, Casey, for jumping on and sharing the story and for being here. So before we get started, please introduce yourself and we will kick off talking about the journey behind the project.
No, great. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Look forward to talking about this very special project that we have. My name is Casey M. Tompkins. I am the Ecologist and Wetland Scientist. I work for Orange Rockland Utilities, which is a gas and electric utility company that services customers in southeastern New York and northern New Jersey. We serve 140,000 customers with natural gas, about 309,000 for electric, and we serve over about 1,300 square miles in total. So we're a relatively small gas and electric company, but we have a wide range, right? We have a lot of different communities that we serve. So I work in the Natural Resources Department at Orange and Rockland. So my group is in charge of managing natural resource related concerns associated with our projects and our various management requirements. That could be anything from managing federal and state regulated wetland areas and state federally listed species, and ensuring essentially that our work that we do has limited effect on the natural environment as possible.
I love it. So this is, a very different group per se, that we speak with here, kind of where we focus on the technology that drives the capabilities that we all think about when we speak of grid modernization. But I think it's really important to highlight, there are all parts being impacted. And so from this project, is pretty fascinating, which we'll kind of walk through, but you ultimately took a piece of land in collaboration with community outreach where you built in really a classroom around the environments of the said property. I'll let you, I don't want to steal your thunder, and really started tying in like the impacts of said utility infrastructure build outs to that environment. So I guess, thinking about the beginning, what was the problem? Because everything starts with a big idea or, a spontaneous thought, that really grounded in to kind of set forth this project.
Right. Yeah, it's a great question. And I mean, honestly, first and foremost, it comes down to just having a natural innate love for nature. I myself am an ecologist. I grew up as a very small child, loving the natural environment, wanting to protect it, wanting to, ensure that it's safe as best as possible. But I also have a background in just understanding that, we need power, right? And so what's the best way to go about that and ensuring that we give people power and gas and everything that they need, but also limit our impact to the natural environment as best as possible. And so I found myself really in a unique situation at a utility company. And believe it or not, people are always coming up to me and saying, what is a utility company doing with an ecologist on staff? They can't believe it. It just, to them, it doesn't make sense. But for me, I say, we manage so much land across the landscape. It is our sole responsibility to ensure that we manage it properly for the sake of the environment, for the sake of our customers, and to be honest, for our company, right? We have that responsibility. And so for me, sitting in this chair, someone that really innately loves the natural environment, I say, you know what, let's get some things done, right? Let's figure out how we can best serve, and not just from a regulatory perspective, but let's go above and beyond. What can we do to make it better? And so we created this biodiversity enhancement program. It's essentially a program that allows us to look at biodiversity as one of the most important factors and drivers of a healthy environment. And so what that means is greater diversity in plants equals to greater diversity in insects and all types of invertebrates. And then it goes up from there as far as like avian species and so on and so forth, right? And so as part of that program, though, one of the most critical components of it is education and awareness. You cannot have a good functioning program, a logical path forward with anything that you want to do unless people are educated on the topic and fully feel your energy, right, around it. People understand that stuff. They do. If you don't have the energy for it, they're going to just completely say, oh, this isn't that important, right? The goal is
But
to energy forward.
I was gonna say I only smile because I feel like I bring all of the energy in regards to, a big reason for the podcast and really AEIC is like the knowledge of one is the knowledge of all, and how important it is for us to educate ourselves on all parts of the system within the system that we're all trying to work within. And so, this project, this effort, this need, it requires diverse perspectives to ensure that we're, understanding the full impacts of, the projects, the capabilities, and really where we're
Right.
headed, not only like where we've been. So I just resonated with, you have to bring the passion for people to be able to listen and
Absolutely.
actively engage.
Yeah. And I mean, from the environmental perspective, most people have that connection to the environment. They just haven't explored it yet. And so we feel it's a really great opportunity for us to get into the community and kind of start connecting people with the benefits of the natural environment and how they can partake in it and enjoy it. And that's where a
Yeah.
lot of these community enrichment projects started. It was, well, let's get to some of our disadvantaged communities. Let's get to some environmental justice areas. Let's talk to libraries and schools and municipalities. Let's create educational spaces, rich with native species, education and awareness signage, everything that we can do to kind of pull kids and other people from inside, close the book for a minute and see it in person, in the meadow, in the little microforest that we create, in the sensory spaces that we do, and really allow them to have that hands-on connection. Because in my eyes, if we could just take 2 or 3 of those kids and push them in the direction of being an environmentalist or being whatever it is, agricultural specialist, then I feel like we did our job and we encouraged it.
Right. And so tying together, and so, modernization really requires public trust, which is a huge, I think, missing point of context that we don't really just speak to, but just genuinely this idea of how do we trust all the partners involved, especially of understanding where we've come from and now here we are. Then you're talking about building out the community understanding of it all. And then we're tapping into a little bit of workforce development because you're educating and informing, the public, which could be a potential pipeline to help support future endeavors. And then there's this enormous, which I think is the bread and butter of grid modernization, is the cross-functional coordination, to really be able to execute a project like this.
Right.
So your project was taking some acreage of land, right, which was a walkway, and you integrated the education of with the natural surroundings with geothermal and understanding of like EV and really like some of the
Mhm.
projects that utilities are core to really
Yeah.
driving and understanding and being a part of, and then like integrating those so that the learning can happen in a
Yep.
really hands-on appeal. I mean, is that in
Absolutely.
essence
It,
the
it
project?
is. It is. It is. So that the project that you're speaking of is one of many that
Right.
we have done. So Goshen Public Library is where this that you're speaking of. That's that specific
Okay.
project. And we created a 1 acre locally native meadow space outside of the library. The the whole site was designed in-house here at Orange Rockland by ecologists. We specifically tailored seed mixes to provide nectar and floral resources for various different pollinator species and grassland birds. With that, right, we had to incorporate education and awareness into this as well, because it's really important to educate people exactly what's happening, right? Getting people out there and seeing it, letting people know that the benefits of a natural space are things like water infiltration, carbon sequestration, diversity of plant matter, right? For various types of insects, biodiversity, all different. I can't even begin to tell you how many benefits it has. Very exciting. I can't wait for the
Yeah.
spring. I can't, right? But the critical part there is showing the community what O&R can do for them on a completely different level other than just providing you with electric. We have the ability and the education and the experience in-house here to do some really great things. And it's so exciting because we see it. We see it when we go back to the library every year, right? We see that flowering meadow. We see the kids out there enjoying it. We hold programs there on a regular basis to help educate the community. I mean, it's such a wonderful thing. And so I always say, well, why aren't we doing this everywhere, right? And so that's why the program just continues to build, because the value there is just unbelievable. And it's just been super fun to do.
And so another big part, of utilities are up against, a mass transformational change. Fundamentally, there's many threads. You have your aged infrastructure, you have your old technology, you have this unawareness that the grid that was built for a one-way power flow is now effectively asked to have this dynamic power flow where the customers, the edge of the grid, could potentially and has shown proof to enable a value. And I guess I just share that there's so much happening within the execution of maintaining safe, reliable, affordable grid. There's, as you said earlier in the conversation, how does one and what is the culture and what is kind of the conversation internally to align the who and then really the when to make such a project happen. And so from your experience being inside the utility with everything else happening, what has been the journey for yourself to really create the alignment, allocate the time? What's the type of extraction of knowledge from others that need to understand what's happening with these resources? And then, has it become like you said, it's really rewarding to see, and I could see it being helpful to the overall cultural well-being of Orange and Rockland that this exists, and it's something that can be, attributed to the whole organization. So what has that been like?
It's been a journey, right? So I've been with Orange Rockland for 11 years. And when I first came over to Orange Rockland, yes, we had an environmental program, but it's not like it is today. This program is built on passion, energy, and communication. Getting people all throughout O&R to love what you're saying as much as you do. We are fully engaged in internal communications here and all types of events and programs to encourage our engineering group, our project management group, construction management, right? Everyone in the company, right? To love what we do and to really appreciate the fact that O&R is such a forward-thinking company, right? We do more for the natural environment than many other companies out there. And if you are a customer who is served by Orange Rockland, I would feel extremely proud of our environmental initiatives that we have at this company. We go above and beyond. And it's really driven this thing over the last 11 years to this point where it's almost unrecognizable from where the beginning was. And we hear from our customers how appreciative and happy they are. We hear internally, right, how grateful and happy they are to have helped support the environment in many, many ways, whether it be for a project, in a community, right, or a sole initiative at a school or a library. You got to remember when we do these projects, right, along our transmission lines or a new substation, what we're doing after the fact is we're planting all these native plants, and whether it be trees, shrubs, and herbaceous species, putting up bat roosting cavities, education awareness signs, right? We are benefiting the community in that way as well. because we are forward thinking, right? And we're just doing a lot of wonderful things out there.
So you mentioned that the one project that we were highlighting is one of many. So, I'm not sure, like in the timeline of all of your exciting initiatives, what about that particular project? And then really, for our listeners, like what are other because you kind of rattled off some, which I think is relevant, is like, when you're installing a transmission line, you're effectively going behind it and installing the native plants, the signage and the education, as well as creating these biodiverse educational settings. Like
Mhm.
what was the learnings from that one, and what are some of the other projects that, you don't have to speak specifics, but just general ideas of like what is happening in this space? Like I feel like, not a whole lot of people understand that there are these little armies within every utility that are
Mm,
effectively working to champion, exactly what you're
mhm.
sharing here. So,
Yeah. We have a really great customer energy services group here at Orange and Rockland who really help drive the clean energy initiative, help their customers really fully understand the benefits of switching to things that, are a little bit more cost effective from the energy perspective. And one of the things that they really are fully engaged in is working with O&R Natural Resources to help create a lot of these spaces to help spread the awareness around not just natural resources, but how to effectively use energy in a more sustainable manner, right? And so when we collaborated and we get out to these communities and we do some of these projects, all different types of things pop up, right? My brain just starts to just, go all over the place. And I start to think about all these different things that we could do. We do sensory spaces, right? That's one thing where we really work with providing sensory mechanisms to children that have autism or are on the spectrum. We create those locations and we factor in things like a lot of natural vegetation and hands-on activities and kind of getting kids outside, getting their hands dirty. And we do a lot of those at schools, right? Schools and even at libraries. Now, we also work with, locations like municipalities where they may have a space that is underutilized and they're looking to kind of spice up a little bit to get a little bit more color, a little bit more attractiveness, more biodiversity, some more fun, right? We do those on a more so regular basis as well. We also like to work on things like forest regeneration as well, understanding that trees are essential to carbon sequestration and also help with cooling effect, right? And so if we can find those locations throughout the community, we will fully embark on those. The newest program that we're working on this year is actually the iFish New York program, which is a DEC initiative to try to get people out from the community to go fishing. Now it sounds funny, but it really, in a way, that's the first thing a child can do to get in love with the environment is to go out and explore, go fishing, right? Do some of those outdoor activities. And so, for me, I had a father that was fully engaged in fishing. I had a parent that loved to go hunting. I had a parent that liked to be outside. So they showed me those wonderful things. Not everyone has that opportunity. Not
yeah,
everyone.
I have a house full of fishermen.
Okay, so
Yeah.
but not everyone has it, right? And,
Right.
and and even if you did, maybe some people don't live in a community that has that ability. Maybe you don't have the financial means. So now we're working with some libraries in our service territory to literally provide all of the fishing equipment necessary and the resources to go in, grab the equipment, check it out like a book, and get out and go fishing on O&R. Go out, have fun, right? It's okay. Be in love with the environment a little bit. And so that was really exciting because for me, I feel as though I'm helping some children get out there, go fishing, and to kind of have that experience. So it's very, very special. And I'm so happy that O&R and our customer group can really make that happen. It's very exciting. But those are just some of the few ones that we are involved in. And honestly, I feel like every day something new pops up. So I'm sure I'm forgetting about a million different things.
Right. And so, like, really, like, I love the framing, loving the environment and engaging the community. And so let's, thinking that from a utility sit at a really interesting intersection because, their role is to manage the infrastructure. And we're in a very transformational time where we know a lot in regards to, managing land and how understanding the importance of a right of way and like,
Mhm.
why we have ecologists and geologists and environmentalists inside the utility is like we are responsible for the impact to the environment. And so there's also this clean energy transition. So, your activity about, connecting with the community is a way to bring that conversation of trust to the forefront in
Absolutely.
regards to translating that into better outcomes for the overall grid, right? I mean, there's a realization that we've created the lifeline of society with this massive infrastructure. We could spend probably a whole podcast around,
Mm,
what does that really mean to our overall communal connections and et cetera. But, so when you build this type of engagement with the community, that trust is, available for when, there isn't a necessary project to
mhm,
ensure the grid continues to run. And there's also this reality is like the grid is here as we transition out to maybe the possibilities of grid no longer needing to be. But that's
mhm.
not happening in the next, 10, 20
No,
years. So we have to have that transitional
right.
conversation.
Mhm.
And I guess being at the table in these community trusts, is there, this engagement around, and you stated it, but like education of energy efficiency and what does these new type of technologies contribute and apply to the overall giving back to the individual to
Yeah.
understand like, oh, is a geothermal, something of positivity, or is my EV charging contributing to something of
Oh,
value? Or like, should I invest in the heat pumps because of certain is that kind of the
oh,
education on
yeah.
above the
A a
actual impact of the environment?
oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, the environmental initiative is a bridge to a much larger conversation, right? It's a conversation that has led to some of the things that you mentioned, right? EV charging, right? What kind of light bulbs should I use? What can I do to modernize my home a little bit more so I don't, so I have a more cost-effective bill, right? It also leads to conversations, why are they cutting around the transmission lines? Why are they doing that? Right? And really what it's happened is it's opened customers' eyes to say, wow, I didn't even know all of that. I didn't know that O&R had such an incredible environmental program. I didn't know that they need to cut trees of a certain height, around the wire line because it's dangerous, right? And we could lose power, right? I didn't know that there was a specific list of trees I should plant next to the corridor, right? To prevent outages, right?
Right.
These things have opened it up so much to and just can I be honest with you? What it's done is it's made O&R employees look human again. We're just people.
Right.
We're
Right.
people. All
I
right.
mean, that's the
Yes,
essence of the
we
podcast.
send
Is
you
like
a
we're just
bill.
people
We
trying
send
to
you
make
a
it work.
bill for your for the services. Absolutely. Right. But we're human beings and we have these amazing skill sets and we are trying to do the best we possibly can for the people, for the planet, right? And for our
Right.
company, you know?
So I love it. So, now if you had to choose, and maybe you can't, but like which impact was stronger? And maybe I'm good. What is it leading the witness? But building trust for, future activities. And it's I heard that. So maybe I'm just kind of running through a list. You're driving awareness around all of these new options. Employee engagement is one, this whole internal culture of just like we are, here to support and develop. I mean, I would love more and more like working inside the utility, right? You are serving the community, right? Like it's a
Mm,
service. Like continue to keep the electrical power flows running safely, affordably,
mhm.
and reliably. And really, then there's the long term environmental stewardship. I mean, I guess you can't really pick because it's kind of all of it. But,
It really
uh,
is. It's
yeah.
it's so intermixed. It really is.
So thinking about, someone who's passionate and really would, maybe they don't have this mature program or maybe this activity happening in their own space, what is some words of wisdoms or lessons learned that you've kind of achieved over the last 11 years in your journey that you would want to share with the listeners?
Mm. Start small.
Good one.
Don't overwhelm yourself,
Don't
right?
boil the ocean.
Yep, exactly. I've had calls a lot over the last few years with utilities, not only locally, but throughout the United States on our specific program and kind of how we engage. our own internal staff, and we work with our customers to make these things kind of happen. And I always tell people, I said, start small, right? Build from there. You really only need one project to kind of make it all go out of hand, right? We had one project. I created a 2-acre meadow at one of our facilities, and I dedicated it to, veterans. And we had it at a Veterans Day event, and it was a huge success. And it just spiraled out of control from there, right? And so now we have this whole new level of a program that is just doing so many great things. And I'll also just say too, is just make sure that I hate going back to this, but it's about energy. It really is. All throughout my career, even before Orange and Rockland, I would always have people come back up to me and say, after I give a lecture or after I speak at a community engagement event, they would say, "Wow, your energy is amazing. You really make me want to do more for the environment or do more within this company." And so if you can tap into your own energy and kind of express that to everyone that you're talking to, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit. Just be careful not to go too big too fast. You don't want to get people too upset, right? You want to slowly work them into it, right? Don't, anytime someone tries to change the specification, right? You can't do it all at once. Just baby steps, a little bit here, a little bit there. And then before you know it, you're talking to Dr. Elizabeth Cook about
Well, I love it. And I think it's really important. And also, a big part of, transforming a reality of what is to what it can be, it requires the individuals to show up. And so your voice matters, your action matters, your energy that you put forth matters with true intent. So I love that you're sharing that. And also, this idea is start small, right? I think a lot of us live in the world that, go big, go fast. And the reality is that doesn't always fit, especially in the world that we sit in,
Yes.
and driving change within the electric utility space. I guess let me just say this, for the listeners, grid modernization is not just about wires and software and technology. It's truly behavioral. It's this awareness that we, need to educate and inform, that efficiency matters, that electrification can be very thoughtful and provocative, but also create a lot of progress. And there are many systems within systems that must be understood to really drive a lot of the efforts that we talk about. So I love that we were able to have you here, Casey, to talk about, this engagement with the community and building the trust is at the core, I think, of really being allowed to transform at the rapid pace that we're all being expected to do. So with that, thank you again for sharing. And I look forward to hearing about more of your projects as you go live with them and, bring those learnings back to your company.
Great. Thank you so much again for having me. I really, really appreciate the time.
That's a wrap for this week's episode of the Grid Mod Pod. Thanks for tuning in. We hope today's conversation got you thinking about new and creative ways to improve our power grid. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to be the first to hear new episodes. This podcast is brought to you by AEIC, the place where operations leaders come together to share knowledge and provide guidance to the electric utility industry. We'll be back with a new episode soon. Until then, keep powering on.